from February when the protocol launched to now I think we're about up to 31 million TVL. So in an environment, I think we kind of touched on this in a previous episode, like an environment where we actually see DeFi TVL kind of shrinking over time. To have this protocol, launch and build up to 31 million TVL in just over 6 months is definitely super exciting.
Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of WAGME TV. We have a great one for you. Hopefully, you guys will find this one interesting. But we have a recent update between Reserve Protocol and Base's new Coinbase's new Layer 2 network Base. So Reserve's actually expanding their stablecoin protocol to be offered on the Layer 2 network. And so now they're going to be allowing basically the deployment of asset-backed tokens on that Layer 2 blockchain. So it's going to be interesting to take a deep dive into this and learn more about it. And so I'm going to kick it over to you to get things started.
Yeah, absolutely. So let me just start by sharing the news article here. So some exciting stuff about a protocol that we've covered in the past here on our show, Reserve Protocol. The stablecoin platform was, just as a refresher, basically a permissionless platform that was originally built on Ethereum to basically build, deploy, and govern asset-backed tokens. Now, this could be anything from stable coins to quote-unquote flat coins to index-style products, right? Where you take a basket of different assets within the crypto and DeFi world and kind of use that composability factor to create like a single token that represents them all. And so really exciting kind of announcement here where they're actually expanding to the Base blockchain. This has, a multitude of different kind of impacts on the entire protocol and what the project is hoping to do. Mainly, it's going to cut fees by a drastic amount, right? When we talked about what Reserve Protocol was and what was kind of hindering the growth earlier on, it is the fact that when you add more and more assets to these complex baskets, it becomes very expensive to actually mint and create that token, right? And so what you have here is a scenario where by moving to Base, you're actually going to allow, basically by a factor of 100 or 1,000 times less in terms of gas costs to actually mint and create these tokens. So something that's very exciting. And, of course, you also combine that with the user base that Coinbase has, right? From a go-to-market perspective, also a very, very attractive kind of move here by Reserve. So I'll kind of leave it there. Happy to answer questions that you guys might have, and we can kind of dive into it. I'm sure a lot of the viewers have a lot of the same questions that you guys do.
What will this turn out to be? So it's awesome to see that Reserve is launching on Base. I think it'll probably be a big switch going from L1 to an L2 from a user perspective, just in terms of the gas fees that it might cost going from, switching or yield farming on an L1, having to pay high gas fees, higher switching costs compared to an L2, where it's relatively easy comparatively to switch to a new asset for a different yield. What do you think? How do you think the user behavior might switch going from that L1 to an L2, Zoe?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I'm really glad you brought up the idea of yield farming too, because if we rewind to the last time that we talked about Reserve, that was like kind of a core growth vector for the protocol itself, right? Like answering the question of like why would somebody actually come in and mint these tokens, right? It's because of these secondary liquidity incentives on the Curve ecosystem, right? The protocol was driving a lot of emissions and a lot of incentives for liquidity, and so that turns out to be a huge incentive for people to come in and actually mint these tokens, then go and farm them. Now, what you have is basically what you can think of as just a way cheaper way to actually get access to these things, right? And so when you're doing the liquidity providing calculation in your head, if you're a farmer, you say, okay, it's going to take me this much to enter this position. It's going to cost me this much to actually deposit it into the pool. And then in order for me to break even, I actually have to make a certain amount of yield for a certain amount of time to then hit my break even point. And then after that, anything I do is profit, right? The thing is on Ethereum, because the transaction fees are so much, you actually end up having to like that becomes a huge part of that calculation for farmers, right? It's not you basically have to stay in a position for a certain amount of time, or basically a certain amount of time to make up for the cost, those higher transaction costs. Now you enter a situation where it's going to cost maybe pennies to mint and redeem these things, and the transaction costs are going to go down so much. So it's really going to open up all these yield opportunities to basically anyone, right? Ethereum, it's known a lot of times as like kind of a whales game where like people with, you have to have like maybe at least, 10, 50 grand or something to even make it economical to yield farm sometimes on Ethereum with the transaction costs. Now all of a sudden anybody with a few bucks can enter into these positions. So that we think that's really exciting.
Yeah, I mean that is really exciting. I mean, we always talk about like, oh, there's probably, a handful of people that are actually utilizing this on Ethereum, right? I would say the big bonus to this is it enables people who are interested in using a product like this to actually use them without having every benefit that they're getting from it wiped out by some of the gas costs, right? Some of the gas fees from the Ethereum network. I guess
Mhm.
that said, when we were talking about this last time, we were talking about curve and the different yields that come along with it. Does that change at all? What do those yields look like with the launch on base?
Yeah, absolutely. So right out of the gate here, when the protocol is launched, there's actually not going to be Curve incentives at this time, but it's something that because Curve has launched on base as well, that's something that's absolutely on the horizon here. So it's really tough to say, what those yields are going to look like. There's a lot of different factors that kind of go into figuring out like what those yields are, and also fragments general voting power, right? Some votes that have to go to one pool can't necessarily go to another, things of that nature. What we do know is that usually on L2s, the competition for these curve pools and yields is much lower, right? It's just much fewer assets that are deployed on L2s, much fewer pools, and therefore, much lower competition when it comes to attractive yields. And that's something that I think will definitely benefit the protocol.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is pretty awesome. I could see Base deploying honestly on Optimism as well. I think a little while back when we were having, or excuse me, Reserve deploying on Optimism as well. When we did our base OP stack, which is the Optimism stack that they built theirs, and so I could see where it's very easy to switch that over to another L2, and then you really get to the opportunity to see how some of these different R tokens might be used differently compared. I think maybe more degen plays happening there compared to maybe an optimism or sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. I think other layer twos are definitely part of the equation and something that's being vetted. I think a lot of effort was put into the base launch, so like that's like uh the main concern right now. But I think other L twos are definitely a possibility in the future for sure.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I'm excited to see kind of where this goes, and I think obviously previous to the base launch, someone that wants to get involved would have to go to kind of the registered.app page, obviously have funds in the MetaMask. I'm assuming that part of the strategy is to obviously get more people's funds into the R token reserve protocol ecosystem. So I'm kind of curious from your perspective what this looks like in terms of, in your opinion, like for accessibility for additional people to get involved in the project, and how that shifts from just having it be on Ethereum versus now being offered on a layer two as well.
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. I think it's something that has definitely been considered. I think there's kind of two parts of that. One is just the ability to access this protocol in like a significantly more cheap way, right? That obviously opens up the door to a ton of people. The other thing is like the the kind of strategic move to actually go towards base, right? I believe, I mean, Coinbase has, somewhere in the, tens, if not hundreds of millions of users. And having that full kind of stack with Coinbase, right? Which is your on and off ramp, your non custodial wallet, now your blockchain in terms of base, and your ability to access different dApps. I think that's really where things get very exciting, where somebody with not that much money. Somebody who's just trying to experiment and learn about DeFi and crypto still has the opportunities that any massive whale has. And that's something that I'm super excited about, right? Something that's going to be a huge difference maker, I think, when you compare the reserve protocol and what it still is on Ethereum to what the potential for it is going to be on Base. Yeah, so from February when the protocol launched to now I think we're about up to 31 million TVL. So in an environment, I think we kind of touched on this in a previous episode, like an environment where we actually see DeFi TVL kind of shrinking over time, to have this protocol, launch and build up to 31 million TVL in just over 6 months is definitely super exciting. And then as of right now, there's no R tokens on Base yet, but some will be migrating over. And we expect others to be launched there as well, especially now because the barrier of entry for launching these things is so low. So a lot still to come, and yeah, it's going to be exciting to see what happens.
Absolutely. Well, obviously, we're going to be, the best resource for some of these updates. And, we're going to be happy to kind of bring additional information as we hear more and how this kind of impacts the market and what Reserve's doing, as well as kind of the growth of Base too. And I think, you hit on a couple of really cool accessibility aspects to that. So especially with Coinbase's network of customers and users. So excited to kind of hear more about that as it progresses. But as always, like, comment, subscribe. We always love hearing your different takes and ideas and whether you'd actually maybe try this if you're a Coinbase customer. So until next week, wag me.